in the name of personal injury law.
Hello and welcome back to In the Name of the Law. Today I'm with Steve and Tom Sinas, who are partners at the Sinas Dramus Law Firm. And today we're going to talk about some unique type of auto accident cases involving commercial vehicles. What kind of cases are these? How are these cases different?
Well, so I'm very proud to have my brother and partner here. We've had the privilege of working on these types of cases in the past. We've also learned from other attorneys at our firm, our father, other partners, decades of experience handling these cases. And I can just tell you one thing, they're certainly unique given the type of injury involved and the theories of liability. And I think Tom's going to be able to tell us some more specific reasons why they're different.
Yeah, I think the way to think about commercial vehicle cases is that they are really different in every respect from a traditional automobile car crash case. At first blush, they may seem like they are the same type of case, maybe with just different kinds of insurance or a different type of driver. But when you really work on these cases, you begin to appreciate that basically every aspect is different. So what are some examples? There are different theories of liability that come into play in a commercial vehicle setting. For example, one theory of liability that's common in a commercial trucking case is whether or not the particular driver was competent or safe to drive that vehicle. There are a totally different set of laws that apply to commercial vehicles. The federal law and federal regulations, there's a whole book that's maybe the size of a phone book that has its own set of regulations that apply to commercial vehicles. There are different types of defendants. There are different types of insurance carriers that insure commercial vehicles that are different from who you would typically encounter in a traditional automobile liability case, which means there are different types of defense lawyers. There's different types of evidence. The evidence that results from a significant semi-truck crash is just different in scope, it's different in type, and it requires a different type of evidence gathering protocol than you would normally have in a traditional automobile case. So from the very beginning, these cases are different by virtue of the fact that the vehicle involved is a commercial vehicle, which is largely judged by the weight of the vehicle, and that weight of the vehicle will subject that particular vehicle to a whole host of separate rules that then has effects all the way down the line, which also means that the damages in these cases have to be approached and developed differently from the very moment the case is worked up. And Steve and I have had the opportunity to do that in a number of different cases, as have other partners in our firm over the years.
So I think you just said that the commercial vehicle is defined by its weight. So does that mean if somebody's using a vehicle for business purposes that's like a regular car, that does not qualify as a commercial vehicle?
Well, to be clear, the term commercial vehicle can be broad. So if you have a vehicle that's being used in the course of a business operation, that could fall under a commercial vehicle. There's semi-trucks, and so when we're talking about semi-trucks, they're a form of commercial vehicle, and they're governed by the federal regulations that Tom was talking about. So one thing to appreciate is that when you have the commercial vehicle involved, what you have is the possibility that a business, in some shape or form, whether it's a trucking company or a business that owns the vehicle, could be held liable for the damages. And they usually have much bigger insurance policies. So it makes, all the difference in terms of what's available for the injured person.
So can you give us some specific examples of how you've handled these cases how differently than other cases?
Yeah, I think Steve makes a really good point, and your question makes a good point. A commercial vehicle sometimes is a legal definition of a vehicle measured by weight. But oftentimes we use that term in a simple sense to define a vehicle that is a traditional vehicle, but it ends up being subject to a commercial insurance policy. And Steve can talk about a case that him and I worked on that involved just that. It appeared to be a traditional automobile, but in fact, it ended up being a commercial vehicle case.
So we took in the case, you look at the facts and you think, okay, it's just a personal vehicle versus a personal vehicle. Unbelievable damages for this family, a fatality, severe injuries to multiple family members. So you take in this type of case and you're like wondering, what can we do for them? And we assumed that what we could do for them was going to be limited. But then we found out that the vehicle that hit them was owned by a corporation that had a very sizable insurance policy, and that changed everything in the case. And
that's right, and it changed the experts that we hired. It changed our approach to developing an investigation into the accident itself, and it resulted in at least 2 years of work before the case could be ready for any meaningful settlement discussions.
And one thing that happened in the case is that because of the amount in controversy, the other side came up with every single type of theory they could find to escape liability. It was blaming, everybody but themselves for this crash. And so it took this great workup to overcome all those challenges. Because that's what happens. If you have the big amount of controversy, the other side has all the incentive in the world to come up with anything they can to try to minimize what they're going to pay your clients.
So can you give us any examples of larger vehicles, like I think you mentioned semi-trucks?
Tom,
that's a great example. These cases are like any significant case. The defense has at their disposal almost an unlimited amount of resources. So I handled a semi-truck case recently that it was a wreck that occurred in Michigan. But to make a long story short, in order to get justice for the family members in that case, the case actually had to be litigated in another state, many states away. And by litigating the case in another state, we were able to not only argue that another state's law should apply, which put a different level of pressure on the defendant, but we were able to bring into the discussion the possibility that the case was going to be tried in front of a very different jury panel than the defense thought when the crash first occurred. And again, that case took over 2 years and traveling multiple states and hiring other lawyers and experts to assist us along the way in order to get the case to the point where the defendants were finally willing to take this family seriously. And I think that's really, and Steve I think would agree, the overarching lesson in these commercial cases is that the lawyer representing the family or family members or all the victims has to be willing to go the distance to get justice.
So are the injuries worse in these cases involving commercial vehicles?
Typically, because of the size of the vehicle and the way the crashes occur, they are, which then creates the further reason why justice has to be fought so vigorously. There's another case that comes to mind where the Canadian trucking company that we had to deal with not only American law but Canadian law. So basically you have to turn over every stone, you have to work up every aspect of it because the other side is doing the same thing.
Right. Well, Tom and Steve, thank you so much today for sharing with us about commercial vehicles and accidents. Can't wait to see you again.
Thanks for having us, Lisa.
In the Name of Personal Injury Law is brought to you by the Sinas Law Firm.